Hello, everyone. And just so you know, we're going to wait a couple of minutes after, maybe a couple minutes after 12, just to, before we get started, um, give everybody a chance to come on to the webinar. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And as we're waiting for people to come on, feel free to put your name in the chat and say hi. Hi, Nat. I'll just go a couple more minutes before we get started. No, we have somebody joining us from Chicago. That's nice. So, mhm. Yeah, it's great to see where everyone's from. It's neat. Great. Well, I can go ahead and get us started. This is a webinar from the Autism Consortium of Texas, which, for those of you who don't know, we meet pretty much once a month during the academic year and try to present new research related to autism and what's going on in the autism field, and also intellectual and developmental disabilities more broadly, as well. And We started back in 2018, and we've been meeting pretty much every month since. So we're really excited to have you all here. I believe at the end we're going to put in an evaluation link, right, Leslie or Javi, so we can get your feedback on our talk today. So I'll get started introducing our speakers. So we have Stephanie Brown, who's a senior research coordinator with the Texas Center for Disability Studies and working on this project, and Amy Yu, who's a third-year PhD student who is just finished her pre-MCA and has been also helping to coordinate the project that they're going to talk about, and they're going to be talking about sort of cultural adaptation and how we went about creating a culturally adapted intervention. So I'm going to turn it over to you to pull up the slides and get started.
Great, thank you, Sandy. Let me share screen.
Okay. I guess, Javi, can you allow her to share screen?
I think I can, but let's try.
Okay.
Yes. And you're all seeing it.
Yeah, we see it.
Are you all seeing the, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the opportunity for us to share our work in this webinar. I just want to check my sound if that's okay for everyone. Yes, great. So my name is Amy Yu, and I'm a PhD student at UT Austin Stevick School of Social Work and a graduate research assistant with the Podea Project in Texas Center for Disability Studies. I'm an Asian woman wearing a gray shirt and a black blazer with a background that shows UT Tower, and I use she, her pronouns. This is my colleague, Stephanie Brown.
Hi, everyone. Yes, and I am the Senior Research Program Coordinator, also at the Texas Center for Disability Studies. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm wearing a black top, which you can't kind of sort of see, but I have it, and a blue jean blazer. And my background is just a beautiful green tree.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. So today we're very excited to be here to talk about an ongoing project that Stephanie and I have been very involved with, which is a culturally tailored health education for Latinx families of children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so in this webinar, we'll start off with a discussion on the important cultural, linguistic, and contextual elements for developing a health intervention in general for underserved populations. So we will look at some frameworks, some theories, and sort of the understanding the cultural nuances, the language barriers, and the contextual factors that's really impacting all of this process. Then we'll go into the description of our peer-to-peer mentoring or the promotora model that we use in the intervention. And finally, we will talk about our intervention development with sort of our what theories we use and the frameworks that we use, and a preliminary draft evaluation of our current pilot study. Sorry, let me go back. Okay, so why do we need culturally tailored intervention? And why does culture matter in as we do studies? Well, we know that culture is a family characteristic that really determines the family dynamics around in the home. So this includes like their habits, their lifestyles, their ways of caring for their family member with IDD. So taking culture into account is actually very important when we're looking to make a change in families. But we know that most evidence-based interventions are really not tested with culturally diverse populations. And we also know that these diverse groups, every one of them have their unique needs, and that can be addressed through these culturally tailored interventions, which then, of course, would promote health equity and would reduce that disparity that's out there. these interventions are really designed to build on what the community already is good at, so their strength. And because of that, community would feel that sense of attachment, and they're more likely to be engaged in the process. And just to kind of give you sort of a background on how underrepresented people of color are in the autism intervention research. In a very recent study that is done by Stemberner and their colleagues, and they found out that out of the 1,013 articles, only 25% reported any data on race and ethnicity. And that's shocking in itself because the majority of the studies, all race and ethnicities are just invisible. So we really don't know what is going on. And they also noticed that there was a slight increase in reporting over time. But out of all those studies that did report, which is those 25%, 64.8% were white, 9.4 were Latino, 7.7 were Black, and 6.5 were Asian. So this is a very, very small amount of studies that actually focus on ethnically and racially diverse populations. Another study that looked at cultural adaptations and their effectiveness, and this is a meta-analysis, so it looked at a lot of these randomized controlled trials and looked at how cultural adaptations is actually working. They found that there is a moderate to large effect on culturally adaptive interventions. They also found that if you conduct these interventions in the client's native language, they were twice as more effective as those that were in English. And of course, they also found that they were 4 times more likely to be, they're more effective than those that are not culturally tailored to the groups. So now that we kind of understand the effectiveness of cultural adaptation and culturally tailored interventions, what do we mean by that? So culturally tailoring an intervention really means that we are taking our intervention to really understand, tailoring it to all the different kinds of needs that this specific group that you are going to serve. So really understanding sort of all of the different contextual factors, the ecological factors around that group, and either developing a new intervention or taking on an existing intervention and sort of adapting that to the needs of that particular group. And there are essentially two types of adaptations. There is a service level adaptation, which is the essence of that is really translating. So translating the intervention and identify the social cultural needs of the family, training a bilingual or bicultural staff or community resident to deliver that intervention so that is in a way that it is understandable for the target population, and then to be able to use culturally specific interpersonal styles. But the essence of the surface level adaptation is really the translation piece, it's the language piece. And I do want to emphasize that surface level adaptation can go very far. And so it is by no means that it is any less, especially if you're in that native language and in studies have found that it is twice as more effective in delivering an intervention just in that native language. So I think that is definitely, this is a very good step to adapting any type of intervention to your target population. And the second type of cultural adaptation is the deeper structure model, which it really embeds the values, the practices, the traditions, all of that, and really reflecting on the help-seeking behavior of that population and how they view the world. And so really taking into the consideration of the social, the cultural, the environmental, the historical factors, and all of those things, and how they influence their health behaviors. And how, because of understanding that, how developing our interventions and use strategies sort of address those things that come up. And so that kind of it leads us to understand, so the process of cultural adaptation. The process of cultural adaptation is really iterative in that that's why we show it in this circular diagram. It really is a process that keeps changing. And because it is changing because we are constantly taking the feedback from our community back into our model and then kind of taking incorporation of their feedback and sort of tailoring it more and more closer to exactly how it would work in this community. So if you look at step 1, create alliance with stakeholders and assess the needs. This is absolutely crucial. We need to reach out to the stakeholders, meaning the person with IDD, the families that of the individuals with IDD, the community members who are a part of this community. It's very important to reach out to these stakeholders to come together and talk about their needs and be able to build that relationship first. The second step is to select an appropriate intervention for adaptation. And so in this case, sometimes people select an existing intervention. Sometimes people come up with new ones, but many times people do select the existing that has shown to be effective in this population that you're working with and sort of tailoring it more to your specific population. And that's the case for us as well. The third stage is to make adaptations based on the stakeholders' input. Like I said, this is an iterative process where, again, after we have developed the intervention, we need to make adaptations. Again, going back to the stakeholder, have them review it, have them test it, and then to have them give us feedback so that we can revise it. The fourth stage is to implement an adaptive version through a pilot, and this is exactly where we are at right now for PADEC. And we will talk a little bit more about that in the latter half of the webinar. And the fifth stage is to evaluate results with the pilot and stakeholders. And last but not least is to update these adaptations and implement and again. And then obviously, and of course, the most important piece of it is that so that we can make disseminate this curriculum and this really be able to be sustainable at the community level. So, so there are a couple of frameworks that are very popular and has shown to be very useful in this work and cultural adaptation work. And one of them is Bernal's ecological ability framework. And what he and colleagues have developed is based on these dimensions. So language, persons, metaphors, content, goals, and methods and context. And it's really looking at sort of how these dimensions and how they can specifically cater to the particular culture that you are designing your interventions for. And we will go into a lot of this more in detail later on in our webinar as well. Just kind of want to show you how we kind of set the stage for our intervention. And the SHARP framework is another sort of a newer framework that really looks at culturally tailoring interventions in more sort of the social justice lens. And this framework allows the provider, the researchers, to really help them focus not just on the clients, but also on the surrounding contextual issues that accompanies them. So all of the sort of the root cause, understanding that root cause of whatever that they're experiencing through right now. And so, for example, in here we see that S standing for structural oppression, really looking at what issues are impacting the person, what are sort of the intersectional oppressions that the person has been going through, and what are some of the is there any access to all the systems necessary for the person to have a good quality life? In terms of H, H stands for historical context, or so asking questions like, what are some of the historical issues that are impacting the environment for these populations? And what are some of the environmental histories that has contributed to where the person is right now and contributing to their behavior right now? A stands for analysis role. So asking questions like, what are the provider or the researcher's role in the service relationship? And will the researcher or the provider maintain that status quo or disrupt that? R stands for reciprocity and neutrality, really looking at the strengths and gifts that the person can share with others and how these strengths and gifts can be used. And P stands for power, looking at asking questions like, what is the person's role in this changing environment and how can the person use their power to impact policies and structures? So taking all of that into account as you design an intervention, particularly for some populations who have experienced a lot of the historical oppressions. So that's kind of like the main two, sort of the two main frameworks that have been really sort of the popular for cultural adaptation work. And here are some of the best practices in developing adapting culturally tailored interventions. Like I mentioned, the most important thing is to involve your stakeholders. And secondly, to use peer-based recruitment, meaning that if families of individuals with IDD already know other families of individuals with IDD, and they can help that recruitment, that is actually more effective than researchers themselves going out and to recruit. And delivery methods as well, using peer support delivery methods, which is the model that we are using right now, the Pomotora model. And also to create, adapt, and translate the material to the specific group. This is referring to the surface level adaptation model we just talked about. Of course, this is translating the material is highly, highly important so that we would always have two sets of materials depending on the preferences of our participants. Ensuring the content is relevant and salient to the group, and ensuring the accessibility and reduce effort and barrier. This is very important, as well as we really need to consider the time, the location, and sort of the availability and sort of some of the barriers that our participant might face in participating in an intervention like this. And so for us, we will go into a little bit more detail later, but we have chosen for our all of our sessions to be run on remotely so that it is best fit our participants' need and would ensure that accessibility. And consider using frameworks that I just talked about that incorporates culture and equity dimension. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage for our PODEA project, which is funded by NYLR. PODEA stands for a very long acronym called Promoting Obesity Prevention Among Latinx Children with Developmental Disabilities and Families Through Engaged Research. They're very long. But there are three main stages for our PODEA projects. There's the R1, R2, and R3. We're currently in the R3 stage, but I'll briefly talk about our R1 and R2 stage. Our R1 stage is pretty much the detecting stage, which is really sort of understanding, defining the and measuring the current status. So like the disparities that's really, and all the factors that contributes to that disparities. So we use the National Survey of Children's Health to really look at this data and comparison between the Latinx children with and adolescents with IDD and compare it to non-Latinx white children with IDD. In our R2 stage, which is an extension of our R1 stage, really is to understand more about this population. So we collected a lot of data, and especially understanding the family and cultural factors, the social determinants of health. So meaning their built environments, their neighborhoods, some of the social economic factors that and the community context. So we collected a lot of this type of data to really understand more about our population. And currently we're in the R3 stage, which is the reducing stage and the intervention stage, to really take things that we have learned about this population. We want to address that disparity through an intervention. So we've designed a caregiver promotora model where we are conducting a one group pilot study right now, and we will follow by a RCT randomized control trial coming up in January. So this is our PODER team, and PODER is a 2-site project by University of Texas at Austin and University of Illinois in Chicago. It's led by our principal investigator, Dr. Sandy Magaya, and this is our team members. And one very important thing about our project is that we have a very diverse community advisory board with different stakeholders, some disability disability advocates. We have some representatives from agencies, grassroots organizations, and directors and staff. We have some community leaders, and we have some mothers of young adults with IDD. And this is very important because they are the ones that are giving us a lot of feedback in how we design our intervention, how we design our curriculum and all the protocols. So this is a very important piece of our project, where we constantly are going back to our advisory board in the initial stage. And currently we're going to our participants and our promotoras for them to provide us the feedback. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage for going into more of understanding what PODER is. And PODER is really a project that the goal of it is to promote the health and well-being of caregivers, as well as children with IDD and their whole family. And the second goal is to maintain a healthy weight in Latinx children with IDD and caregivers. So for our curriculum development, we've merged 2 effective culturally tailored programs that have been used with Latinx families of children with IDD. And we tailor it, after we merge that, we tailor it to the content to the participant specific to Poder Familiar, which is our intervention's name. So what is Poder Familiar? So Poder Familiar is, in Spanish, is power of families. So we want to empower our families. And it is a 10 remote sessions, individual sessions, and 3 group session interventions. And our goal is really for both of the caregiver and the child to have to be able to meet these goals that you see here. So on the left, this is the caregiver's goal. We hope that by the end of the session, they will be able to attend to their emotional and social well-being, be physically active for at least 1 hour per day, consume 5 portions of fresh fruits and vegetables per day, and drink 6 to 8 cups of water per day. We also hope that their child will be able to have sufficient hours of sleep, 9 hours of sleep, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, 2 hours of screen time, at least the maximum, and 1 hour of physical activity per day, and no sugary beverages. And this is kind of our goal that we keep emphasizing throughout our intervention. Of course, we have a lot of strategies to try to help them obtain that and sort of maintain that healthy behavior. That is pretty much our ultimate goal of the program. So some of the this is an example of what our individual and group session look like. So in our individual session, we will start with a welcome, and we talk about the purpose of the session, some of the learning objectives, and then we'll go into a lot of the content of that particular session. Usually we will have some kind of activity that talks about sort of how to have a healthier lifestyle. We have a lot of questions for the participant, and a lot of prompts for the pomodoras to ask the participants to really foster a discussion. So this, a lot of this is not just a one-way didactic teaching. It's very interactive. We want the participants to really think about their context and how to apply these knowledge in their context. We use a lot of stories in our sessions. And the reason we do that is we've shown to be really effective working with Latina mothers, and that's just really getting involved in that story and being able to kind of use that sort of as a and thinking about their own story and how it relates to them. This is have shown to be very effective in having that discussion. We have a lot of the sessions talk about goal setting, and this is actually one of our sort of a very important activity of our sessions, is that we would spend some time really understand how to set goals for our and realistic goals for our with our participants, so that by the end of the program, they would be able to really evaluate their the goals that they have accomplished. We used a system called a traffic light system. It's been used in other projects and shown to be effective. It's pretty much a simple type of system where you use the analogy of the red light, yellow light, and green light. So the red light would symbolize like stop a behavior, yellow light would symbolize continue a behavior, and green light would symbolize start a new behavior. So it kind of categorizes these behaviors for the participant and for them to be able to kind of conceptualize, so which are the behaviors that they need to focus on. And what we'll have, we'll just wrap up after the goal setting activity and the action plan. And then we will sort of introduce our resources. All our sessions come with a lot of resources. We also have a toolkit on the side, which Stephanie will talk about in a bit. And this is kind of how each individual session looks like. It takes usually about, depending on many things, but it usually is about an hour and a half for each individual session, or an hour to an hour and a half. So for our group sessions, our goal is really to foster social learning and these hands-on demonstrations. Social learning meaning that parents could learn from other parents and their sharing. And this has shown to be very effective, particularly among this community. And so we wanted to incorporate the group sessions as well. And Stephanie will go on and talk about the Pumatura model.
Thank you, Amy. So yes, so now I'm going to go into describing our peer-to-peer mentoring model that we used in our intervention. Next slide. So here, I'm going to go into our Promotora de Salud model. So this is very unique to our study. So as we mentioned, we want to definitely design a culturally appropriate intervention for our Latino families. So what we did for our Poder Familiar intervention is we recruited promotoras who are mothers themselves of children with IDD. And as you can see on the right side of the bubble also says that they're able to share common identity with the participant. So that's a very valuable component of our promotoras. They're also health educators in the community. They are respected and visible. And of course, they're bilingual to address that language barrier that a lot of Latino families experience. And lastly, they understand how to host the community. Next slide, please. And for the promotora's role, their role was essentially to deliver the 10 sessions via Zoom. So they have to understand also the entire curriculum. So like Amy mentioned, there's 10 sessions and they had to truly go through understanding and fully knowing what goals are expected out of each session. And they also had to be, efficient with using technology. So Zoom specifically, from creating meetings, Zoom meetings, to sharing with the families and ensuring that they are able to know how to connect, and also help parents navigate necessary services and provide resources as needed, which I'll go into a little bit later how we took care of that. And then their role was to also share relevant personal experiences when needed. And lastly, complete all relevant documentation and reporting in a timely manner. And for our promotora training, what we did is they were all required to join. This was 4 modules, about 3 hours each. So the promotora would receive also in addition a copy of the manual of the Poder Familiar intervention, and also a digital copy as well. And they also received very thorough training, like I mentioned before, of the Zoom, using and accessing Zoom, and also knowing how to troubleshoot with the families, as some of our families, don't know the best ways to connect virtually. To some of them, a lot of them is new. So really, truly taking the time needed to help our promotoras know how to troubleshoot. And then we also conducted by experienced facilitators with background in social work and experienced promotoras. And then in our training, we also covered various topics. And just to kind of share a few, like I mentioned, we gave them a review of the curriculum. We focused also how to build rapport and demonstrating cultural humility. This is a very important aspect of our intervention. We want to ensure that, the promotoras understand that what it takes to build that trust from the very beginning to end of our intervention, as part of being able to accomplish those goals that we have, what we want for the families to get out of the intervention. We also talked about setting boundaries. So just to give insight on that. So sometimes our promotoras, our families, especially the Latino community, we all have different roles. So it's important to be able to be flexible and kind of set boundaries around how we're going to set times aside consistently to meet and go through the sessions. And then we would also talk about problem solving, which is also related to what I just said about the flexibility around scheduling sessions. Also, we talked about how to engage the family members. So another unique thing to our intervention is that we want to incorporate and have the entire family join. So we really digged in deep about what ways we can incorporate all the family in our sessions if wanted. And then we also talked a little bit about participant engagement. So in what ways can we engage the participants to, be excited, empowered, and be able to, accomplish all of their goals that they want, that they design for themselves. And then, as I mentioned, a little bit of technology and our toolkit, which I'll go into a little bit later. And then lastly, we focused on the code of ethics, CT training, and the documentation and reporting process. And now I'll be talking about how we recruited our participants. So our participants for our study, one of the requirements was that they are Latina moms themselves, caregivers of children with IDD. And in this pilot study, we recruited 15 families in Austin and 15 families in Chicago. This is a 2-site study, so that's where the 15 in Austin and 15 in Chicago numbers come from. And we shared our flyers and our social media accounts. So like other Facebook groups that are, discussing or they're about topics related to IDD. So that was one of our major ways of recruiting participants. We also joined with local to Austin nonprofit or community organizations as well. That was definitely another way that we recruited our participants, so they were aware of this amazing intervention. Next slide, please. And like I said, Facebook groups was definitely our main way of recruitment, nonprofit organizations, and lastly, our family and friend referrals. So one thing that I did for our recruitment, as well as when we would recruit one family, I would also kind of like share the flyer with them. And sometimes we would have those referrals come through participants already enrolled in the program. And then for promotora recruitment, we also partnered with local nonprofit organizations. And out of this recruitment, we hired a total of 6 promotoras, 3 in Austin and 3 in Chicago. So that, again, we had 15 participants. Our goal was to assign each promotora 5 participants. That way they have a small caseload where they can focus and give them their full attention throughout all sessions and group sessions as well. And then one unique thing as well for this intervention, we have a lot of unique things, but I want to highlight that ongoing support to the promotoras is very important, because it is very helpful to help them have and gain the tools they need as potential problems, come up throughout the intervention as it's being delivered. So one of the things we would do is we would track the progress of each remote session. So as the coordinator of this study, part of my job and my role is to give that support. So I would track each session per participant to ensure that they are going through the entire program. And I would also troubleshoot, if I would notice like, oh, maybe this participant isn't advancing in the sessions, let's explore and assess, what's happening. So that's definitely one way that I would like support the promotoras. And it just kind of holds that that space to, hold the promotoras accountable to continue the sessions with each participant. And I would ensure that we would track also that each session is being recorded for future purposes that Amy will go into, like our evaluation of the program, which would give us feedback on that as well. The second way that I would support our promotoras is track that they are completing the feedback surveys that they're expected to complete after each session. So again, for feedback, for us to know what way we need to tailor or modify our intervention. So I would ensure and make sure, and give biweekly reminders to the promotoras, hey, like, let's make sure all of these sessions are being completed, and also supporting them and finding ways to also troubleshoot, because sometimes participants, would forget or don't understand the reason or purpose behind it. So just troubleshooting in that aspect as well. And then lastly, I would support them with any challenges or concerns, or just general questions that would come up as they're delivering the intervention. So one of the things that would come up a lot was community referrals. So, every participant had different needs. So sometimes I would have to take a need from one of our participants and like take some time to figure out what's the best way to refer them out into the community. So that's definitely kind of also one of the key components of supporting our promotoras, but most importantly, the participant. And also sometimes, like I mentioned, there was challenges around scheduling. So we would also kind of find ways to address, why the participants are struggling to join the sessions. Sometimes it was something as simple as connecting them with a different promotora that has more of the same availability to join for the remote sessions. And then sometimes we would have delicate situations come up, as related to specific mental health scenarios. So we would address those, and mostly they ended up in like community referrals in the community. And then, like we mentioned, as part of the community referrals, we also have a toolkit in our intervention. So this is a toolkit that basically was designed to give guidance to our participants for community needs. So in our toolkit, we have specific resources. Like I mentioned before, we have the studies for 2 sites. So we outlined specific resources for the Austin community and the Chicago community. And we included resources that related to each session in our intervention. So it was very nice. It was organized, and it was organized by session based on different things that the session talked about. So just for example, we included local physical activity events that happen locally at both sites. And we included also as well, like, just general medical, dental, physician, doctors that are open to the community that would help specifically our Latino populations, where they would feel comfortable, going into the toolkit to find what they need at the time. So this was definitely something very nice about our program that was also very referenced from me, as I would support and direct our participants with the needs that would arise. Again, I just want to clarify and say that it is very hard sometimes to add all the resources. It's impossible to add all the resources that families may need all in one guide or toolkit. So going back to the ongoing support, there was times where there is not a resource in the toolkit that the participant needed, or they wanted something very specific or different. So that I would take time to really truly take that need and just refer them out to the community. So just this is just a simple guide, definitely very helpful. Next slide, please. And then now I would like to go over some of our promotoras. So on the left side, we have Adriana, and she shared that she feels very fortunate to be a part of the program that helps to change the lives of mothers and their whole family by encouraging and supporting them to have a better lifestyle. And then in the middle, we have one of the Chicago promotoras, and she shared that she really likes helping mothers of children with disabilities, and they often have very little access to support systems, and they don't have time to care for themselves. We teach them how to take care of themselves and their families. And lastly, we have another promotora who shared that she says, I have enjoyed being a promotora because of the opportunity to support mothers of children with special needs. I remind and teach them strategies about the importance of taking care of their health and well-being, creating habits and routines that help them take care of their needs so that they can better care for their families. So
I just want to add something, Stephanie, that to let the audience know that these are all parents of children with IDD. And so just want to make sure you know that they are not only community members in their community, but they're also experiencing similar things that the participants do.
yes, thank you, Sandy. Yes, so kind of adding to what Sandy was saying. So like she said, these are mothers of children with IDD themselves. So they are able to kind of pull from their shared experience when it comes to delivering the session. So now my next points are more coming from the promotora perspective. So our promotoras really feel like it is important for participant engagement to define the value of the program to the families, and also learn the family dynamics. And like I mentioned, draw from personal experiences, prepare and stay ready to learn from family challenges, create connections, and hold participants accountable, while also at the same time giving them grace. And then just, also holding themselves as a promotora accountable. So I want to go in a little bit deeper in the learning the family dynamics with the promotoras and giving them that ongoing support. It's very important for them to understand and get to know the family. So this is very, very important. One thing that the promotoras continuously shared with me that helped them get through their individual sessions. And then our promotoras also identified that it is very important to be flexible. So like I mentioned, that was one of the ways that I supported troubleshooting. So there was also, they experienced last minute cancellations and rescheduling. So that sometimes was a little bit challenging for the promotoras. They also said it is important to be flexible to adapt the promotora training to the participants given their specific lifestyle and socioeconomic status. So to give more context, our sessions are designed where there are goals that they developed themselves. And so sometimes it's difficult to take one concept and for it to perfectly align with each family. So the promotoras had to learn and find creative ways to be able to take that goal that would be better adapted to that participant. So in other words, kind of meeting the participant where they're at. And it was also important to help create those SMART goals in a way that's realistic so that they can be achieved in a realistic time frame. And lastly, they highlighted the importance to emphasize the toolkit guide. So reminding the participants to, if you want to learn more, to go and dive a little bit deeper in the toolkit. One thing I think I forgot to mention is that our toolkit also has additional exercise activities around physical activity. So sometimes for those families that were curious and wanted to learn more, could go in the toolkit and dive a little bit deeper. And then the outcomes from a promotora's point of view. So from our promotoras, they highlighted that the mothers demonstrated understanding of how to continue developing new goals and improved healthy habits. They were also able to see the confidence boost that they were experiencing as they advanced throughout the program. And then lastly here, they are able to found a new power, so newfound poder, as they achieve their goals.
Thank you, Stephanie. So now that we will go into our curriculum development process, how do we develop the whole curriculum, and the pilot evaluation and some of the results that we have so far. So we developed our intervention based on the theories and frameworks, the self-efficacy theory, which really states that people need to intentionally develop expectations or believe in what they do in order to make a particular change. And so having grounded in this theory, we intentionally develop our curriculums with some of the key elements of this theory, and which includes sort of understanding the needs of the child and giving them ways and strategies to how to address those needs and help. This is pertaining to healthy behaviors, and we also have discussion questions and reflection questions, different kind of goal setting activities, and the interactive learnings and problem solving, the things that they come up with at home, especially fitting to their context. So this is the way that we applied this theory. The second theory framework that we use is a transformational theory. There was ongoing reflection and discussion about routines, beliefs of health, and problem solving, and these cases. And so, like I've mentioned before, like what Stephanie have said, this is a lot of the conversation, a lot of catering to their families' context. So the role of the promotoras is very important, because a lot of her delivery is really to bring out more discussion in terms of understanding. So how can we tailor this content to your family's needs? We also incorporated the health belief model, which is a discussion about common myths, cultural ideas, and routines. So some of the common myth that is within this culture, and what are some of the things that maybe we can do to kind of address that. And we also incorporated the culturally relevant interventions for the Latinx community, use metaphors, stories, visuals, the ways of cooking, so that are typical to the culture. And this is all our content that's covered in our 10 sessions. Our 10 sessions are delivered by our promotoras via Zoom. And the topics that talks about overall sort of the health and well-being of the caregiver, and also the health and well-being of the child with IDD and their families. And we also emphasize a lot on diet and a lot on physical activity. There's also 3 group sessions that's delivered by staff, but we also invite our promotoras to come on board and also facilitate the group sessions. So the model that we take in developing our intervention, the Poder Familiar, is the deep structure model. So we started off with the voices of our community. We go to our community advisory board. We have all these feedback, and then we would incorporate all these feedbacks into these elements that we wanted to include in our intervention. And these are the linguistic preferences, health literacy level, the behavior preferences, the ways of doing things, values and ways of thinking, acculturations, and different generational differences. These are the social, cultural, and spiritual physical environment, format of delivery, ways of learning. Stephanie will go into a little bit more in terms of the some of the examples of what we actually did in these categories.
Yes, thank you, Amy. So the first adaptation we did was linguistic preference and health literacy levels. And the way that we did this in our intervention is we ensured that we used plain language throughout the entire intervention itself, in both English and Spanish, as some of our participants were bilingual. We also included a lot of metaphors and brief short stories. So for example, with our short stories, we would have like a scenario that was designed in a way where our Latino Hispanic mothers were or caregivers were able to understand in a realistic way of what the day-to-day may look like for them. So that was definitely one very good way of connecting and meeting them where they're at, giving their literacy levels. And then in terms of behavioral preferences and ways of doing things, like I mentioned before, we would meet the family where they were at and use healthy eating visuals for them. So for us, I say for us as a Latina myself, specifically around this, ways of doing things, there's specific ways that we think and feel about healthy eating. So we would make sure that we would, take their cultural way of cooking and help them understand, what makes it healthy and just identify those connections as well with them. The next way we adapted values and ways of thinking was, we would include dichos that we have in our community. So they would feel comfortable and like it feels relatable. And we would also, include Latinx, Latino values such as familismo and personalismo that are very important for us as into the intervention as well. And then in terms of ways of thinking, we would, as Amy mentioned previously, we used the traffic light analogy. So that was very helpful for them to see it visually and also just be able to understand, the association between the green, yellow, and red colors of it, which is very fun for them. And then in terms of social, cultural, spiritual, and physical environment, we used a lot of symbols, artifacts, visuals, arts, and music in our intervention. And this was very helpful for them because they were able to say themselves that they were able to gain something out of it because it was designed in a way where like they understood. So they appreciated that. And that's why we included it for them to feel that way. And then again, like I mentioned, that we developed that toolkit of resources so that they wouldn't feel that they had to, look for themselves and felt supported in specific, ways that they needed. And lastly, the format of the delivery. So primarily we used the promotora model. So we found mothers themselves of children with IDD to deliver the intervention to other mothers and caregivers with children with IDD. So that in itself is very helpful and being able to connect with that shared experience. And then, of course, the one-on-one sessions that creates kind of an intimate setting so that they're able to, fully connect socially, but also sometimes emotionally, especially for our session 2, where we talk about caring for ourselves. That's a very sensitive topic. So having that intimate setting is very important for that topic. And lastly, for our group sessions, we enabled social learning. So for our group sessions, we invited all of our participants to join. It wasn't just like each participant would join individually. We kind of created that community environment through our group sessions to be able to share and learn from each other. So it was very nice for our participants and see them exchange information with children of different ages as they walk different walks of life, kind of engage and, like I mentioned, share resources and different opportunities and ways to help their families.
Okay, so now that we'll go into our evaluation piece, there's 4 mechanisms that we use to evaluate our curriculum, and they are participant feedback surveys, Pomodoro feedback surveys, fidelity checklist, and participant focus groups. The feedback surveys are filled out right after each session for both the participant and the Pomodoro. So currently there are 15 participants at each site, and only one participant from each site have dropped out of the program. So we have very high retention rate. It's still ongoing, but we're wrapping up here in UT and close to wrapping up in Chicago. In our feedback surveys, we ask questions like this. So for our participants, we ask questions about content, the presentation of the content, the time, and how they feel about their Pomodoro, satisfaction overall, confidence in the application of the goals. There were a total of 13 questions. There were 11 multiple choice and 2 open-ended, which really gives us a lot of feedback in terms of more description on what they would like things to be improved. For the Pomodoro feedback survey, we asked questions about their preparedness, the content, the presentation of the content, the time that's allocated, goal setting activities, application of the goals. There were a total of 10 questions, 6 multiple choice, and 4 open-ended questions. And for the multiple choice questions, most of our participants in Pomodoro strongly agreed agreed that the content cover was relevant, organized, and easy to follow and focused on their needs. The goals set were feasible and the time allocated for the session was adequate. All participants agreed that their Pomodoro was well prepared and helpful in sharing that personal experience and encouraging and supportive. I do want to emphasize that going back to Stephanie's point about the ongoing support with the Pomodoros is crucial in this intervention because we wanted to make sure that they are very prepared in every session. And in our open-ended questions, there were a lot of feedback from our Pomodoros and especially our Pomodoros and our participants in areas of improvement. And so there were a lot of them, but I've categorized into these areas. They talked about content, curriculum organization, presentation slides, how can we improve those? The toolkit itself, the modalities or the ways of delivering this curriculum, and social support, compliments, meaning that we asked for improvements, but they also still said this is great, nothing needs to be improved. So there's a lot of those as well. They also gave a lot of feedback about logistics, just really understanding things like technology and use of Zoom sharing screen and things like that. Then we asked them about.
Do you think you could give an example of each of these? You just did compliments and logistics, but maybe just like what's an example of a recommendation for curriculum?
Oh yeah, content. Of course. So for content, we've asked more specifics on catering to their particular context. So things like how to in our curriculum, there were times when we made more general comments about these are the activities that you can do. But we got a feedback from a Pomodoro saying that how can we incorporate the child in this activity so that it is not just the mother that's doing the activity, but how can you include your child doing this? So for example, like doing chores, how can we include our child with IDD to also do chores together? But what are some of the things that you can talk about during chores and things like that, or preparing for a meal? So asking about different questions with your child to see that is sort of a way not only interactive, but also there's that learning piece as well for the child. And also just sort of those things that come up a lot from our participant and Pomodoro. Our participant didn't really talk about that. It was mostly our Pomodoro really felt like that was a kind of a need that they wanted to be more specific in how to include their child. In terms of organization, they were like the piece that I just showed you a while back about the what an example of what a session looked like. There were different there in different sessions, there were just parts of it that would flow better if certain parts go after certain parts. And so like we got a lot of feedback from that as well, just in a way that we can make the session flow a lot better. So initially the way that we designed it was a little bit, I guess, to some people, so some of the participants and the pomodoros were a little bit choppy, but like after they run it the first time, they felt like there's some certain sections that should precede other ones. That kind of goes into our presentation slides. There were just some slides that were there was some misspelling, or there was some translation part of it that was not as accurate, and so our pomodoros kind of picked that up, and so that we changed that as well. In terms of the toolkit, they asked a lot about just additional resources, so we had a lot more input into what are the things that our mothers are really looking for. Modality, a lot of them asked about like videos, more sort of like an interactive part, more different types of exercise. So we talked about like using stories and some discussion questions, but in our new curriculum, we are really looking to kind of incorporate the video piece in it. But there's a lot of challenges to that. So we're still thinking about that as well. But that is one of the piece, a lot more visual, a lot more videos for modality. In terms of social support, a lot of the parents and the promotora said that it'd be great if we can have like more sort of resources for social support, like parent groups or like other types of gatherings. And I talked about compliments and the logistic part of it. And so in the end, we asked them about like some topics of interest other than the ones that we currently offer in this program. Many of them talk about they want more general knowledge about autism in general and the communication skills with their child. So how do they communicate with their child in the ways that the child would be able to understand and they will be able to understand. Service navigation was a big piece that a lot of them mentioned that they would like to know more about. And we did cover relaxation and meditation very, very briefly in one of our sessions. But I think this sort of also consistently came up that they probably want a little bit more depth to that topic. So just to conclude, culturally tailored intervention has shown to be very effective. And this is very important work in that it addresses the health disparity that exists in culturally diverse populations. And this will really help to improve the quality of care among these populations and making it sustainable at the community level, which is very important. And the way that we have been developing and implementing this model is really an iterative process, like I've mentioned, and that we continuously incorporating these feedback from the community so that they would really feel like this is specific for them, that they could really feel that this will work for them. And this process is very dynamic, ongoing, and that we would use this, hopefully be able to use this at a provider level and a practice level, so that it's also easy to disseminate at the community level. The use of our promotora model has shown to be effective, but it also has shown to be effective in our study as well, and in delivery the program. We found that our promotoras and our participants were very satisfied, and they really enjoyed that sort of the shared experience of it. And lastly, and the most important thing is to really include the voice of the community. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of that community participatory process of developing this curriculum, developing the entire intervention, all the protocols and all the evaluation. It is critical to have the voice of our community. And that's all we have. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Let's see, you can stop sharing maybe, and then we can have our panel here answer questions. And I noticed there are some questions in the Q&A, so that's fantastic. And I don't know, Javi, if people are also able to ask their question verbally or no. I'm not sure the setup of this webinar.
Yeah, we can unmute people. In the past, we've done questions in the chat. So it kind of just depends on what your preference is.
Okay, so I'm using the Q&A and I'm going to go through that. So the first question says, so many resources for autism are centered on the needs of children and families. What culturally affirming programs are available for adults, especially adults who realize later in life that they're on the autism spectrum? And that's such a great point. Really, I'm going to say point and question, because it is true that most research is focused on children and families, and also true that many people are now recognizing they never got detected as a child to have autism and are recognizing that they may be on the spectrum. And so they're often getting, are left out of the situation. I will say in terms of interventions, that have been tested in research or evidence-based, there aren't that many for adults, let's be honest with you. And so that's an important area of research. Now, this project, Poder, we are planning to write a proposal because this grant is ending this next year in 2024. So we're planning to write a proposal for Latinx adults with IDD, but also including their families. And we have not talked about whether, about the issue of realizing in later life that they have autism, but I'm sure we'll give thought to that. I just met with a research team too, where we're going to be talking about developing an intervention for adults, mental health intervention for autistic adults. So, we will be thinking about cultural issues related to that as well. So I don't know if anyone had anything to add to that. Next question. Were there any gaps in the community resources that you identified in Austin? Did you have any time where a family needed a resource, but you couldn't find something to meet their unique need?
Yeah, I can speak to this. So yeah, definitely. I did have one participant where I couldn't find a resource for the unique need. So to troubleshoot this, I found the closest community, I just lost the word, the community resource that was closest to their need. And sometimes I would just call. It was as simple as calling and just saying, hey, I have someone who has this specific need. And for that one call, it worked out. They were able to guide me to other resources that were open for that. So that was definitely one way. Sometimes there are resources out there that are not posted online. So sometimes a phone call can be a way to help. And then another just quick tip that I use is I use Find Help. So it's a very cool resource just because you can enter their zip code and keywords of the specific community resource you're looking for. So not only does it find the, what's it called? The resource, but also it's close to their area. So that was also very helpful. That's a good question.
Yeah. Here's another good question. Wondering what consideration was given to children who may have restrictive eating preferences.
I can speak to that. So a lot of our children with ASD children have restrictive eating preferences, and these parents do express the different needs, very different needs. And so what we did was in their individual sessions, we acknowledge that, and our promoters do acknowledge that, and they would give sort of the common practices for different type of restrictive eating preferences, and so they would share that perspective and the common practices. But at the same time, they will also provide some resources if they have the family themselves have not received them already. Maybe some of the trainings or some of the other more specific ones for their family that they can provide so that they can attend to, and then they could understand more about their specific needs. So we will refer that out basically. We also had that actually came up in one of our group sessions, and we were talking about that. Different families kind of share how like their child eats like this and their child eats like that. So like we there that in that process, in the social learning process, was also really helpful because they were sharing resources with each other. And then that's exactly what we wanted to the social learning process. And hopefully they'd be able to get some answers, and they'd be able to have their more specific strategies from other sources as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because we did include children with intellectual developmental disabilities, but that included children with autism, Down syndrome, and other intellectual disabilities. And I think a good portion of our sample were kids with autism, and many of them do have restrictive eating habits, and it varies between different types of disabilities. Okay, next question. I had to step out for a bit at the beginning. Sorry if you already covered this information. How does family go about enrolling in the curriculum? Good question.
Yeah, I'll answer that. So our families, there's a few ways they can go about it. It could be like I said, there's a flyer that we have. It has a QR code. So if the family has a flyer or sees it somewhere on social media, they're able to just scan that QR code and fill out an interest form. So that then lets us know, hey, this person is interested, and someone from our team will reach out. So that's one way that they can enroll. You can also email one of us, Amy, Sandy, or I, and then we would just reach out to that family and give them that interest form link so that they can say, you know, hey, they're interested, and put some information so that we can reach out and further assess if they qualify.
Yeah, and just to say, we're not recruiting right now. So we finished this pilot study, Amy and Stephanie mentioned that we're going to start recruiting for a randomized controlled trial probably in February. So what we're doing right now is making all the changes to the curriculum, which based on that feedback that Amy presented that we got from people, we're making actual changes. And then we're going to do a larger study where we're going to recruit 30 families from Texas and 30 families from Illinois. And then we will have a new QR code that we'll send out and share as widely as possible. Any other questions? And feel free to raise your hand to ask verbally or put in the either chat or Q&A. Here's a new question. Does the study include families of mixed race which includes Latin culture? Anybody want to take that? I can answer it too.
Okay, you can answer it.
Yeah, of course. The family has, I think our criteria was that if the primary caregiver, who's generally the mother, identifies as Latinx, and they could be mixed race, is however they identify, and their child, they identify their child as Latinx, and that child could be mixed race as well. I will say most of our families, both in Chicago and Texas, have been of Mexican American descent, and they, you know, whatever race that is, but I mean, whatever mixed race they may have, they also probably more in line with Mexican culture, but we tried to be, you know, cognizant because there were some people from different Latin American backgrounds as well. Other thoughts? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And I think there might be a message in the chat from Javi. Complete our post-webinar survey, please. So if you can click that on, it really helps us in terms of, you know, getting feedback from you.
Another question.
Awesome. Do you want to read that one?
Yes. As part of the study, was there any data collected on the family's health, physical activity, balanced diet before and after the curriculum?
Really
Yes,
good
thank you
point.
for the question. Yes, we collected um, assessment data, and it focused on the family's health and physical activity and all their different types of dietary preferences, on top of the social and contextual factors that I've mentioned before. So it's a very, very lengthy, different types of interviews
Yeah.
that they go through, but we did collect that as well. We will be and then we tested it again at the post intervention to see if there are any differences after completing our program.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question because that's really going to show whether they're making change over time, like, you know, compared to before and after. And so they actually have two Zoom interviews with our graduate student research staff to collect all of that data. As Amy mentioned, there's quite a battery of questionnaires that we administer, and we administer at the end of the study as well. And then we also are doing focus groups to get more qualitative feedback at the end. Okay. Any last lingering questions? Thank you so much. Yeah, you guys were great, by the way. Great presentation. And thank you everyone for coming. And I know Leslie Jackson will keep everybody posted about our next topic in January. So we'll talk to everybody later. Have a great weekend.